welcome to the webcast Influence Tomorrow with the SCR Certificate. I'm Caroline Berman, an event planner here at the Global Association of Risk Professionals, and I'll be your producer during today's program. Before we get started, I would like to share a few housekeeping reminders to help optimize your webcast experience. If your screen freezes at any time, try hitting F5 to refresh. If you have any technical difficulties, click on the yellow question mark on the bottom of your console. You may find the answers in the FAQs listed there. If you have any further technical questions or content questions for our panelists, there is a Q&A box on the left-hand side of your console. If you have questions throughout the broadcast, please type them in and press submit. You can download today's slides from the resource list. If you don't see the resource list on your console, please click on the blue paperclip icon in the tools at the bottom of your screen. Double-click on the download slides link to access the PDF. You can resize any of the windows on your console by holding down and dragging the bottom right corner of the window. Lastly, this webcast will be archived and viewable on demand on the garp.org website approximately 24 to 48 hours after the broadcast. With that, I would like to introduce our moderator for today's session, Beth Gould Creller, Senior Vice President of Certifications and Educational Programs and the SCR Program Manager here at GARP. Beth will kick off the program. Over to you, Beth.
Good morning. Thank you for having us today. We're glad to have you joining us. So today our speakers come from different places around the world, different industries. I'd like to welcome Guillaume Nerzik.
Hi.
Nice to see you. And then we also have Ryan Vaughn joining us. Nice to see you, Ryan.
Hello.
So before we dive into our panel discussion, I'd like to provide a brief overview of GARP and our SCR program in general. So GARP is a not-for-profit member-based organization. We are advancing the risk management profession through education, research, and the promotion of best business practices globally since 1996. After launching our Sustainability and Climate Risk Program in mid-2020, we recognized several benefits for those earning the certificate. Overall, since firms recognize GARP as a global leader in risk management education, our global recognition granted candidates that credibility. Those that are joining the program also feel like they're increasing their knowledge base in a very growing field that's quickly evolving. Our rigorous assessment that's developed by subject matter experts in the field allows us to test your understanding of these fundamental concepts using an application-based approach to the material. And finally, we found that certificate holders feel empowered to ask those tough questions back at the entities where they work. They can guide their firms through this climate risk journey and just give them a jumping off point to start. Industry leaders advise our curriculum from all over the world. They're across industries, and these experts indicate key trends and issues we should include in our program materials as we update them annually. When we consider climate risk leaders who earned the SCR certificate, they represent countries around the world and many global sectors and business lines. We also see that SCR certificate holders work at top employers all over the world. Registration just opened for our fall exam. So if you choose to sit the exam in October, our window begins on the 22nd and terminates on the 30th. We do recommend around 130 study hours. You're provided with an ebook of the full curriculum, a study guide with useful tips, and a full-length practice exam when you register. Upon completing and earning your certificate, we also offer a continuing professional development program so that you can continue your risk journey and network with other SCR certificate holders. Our curriculum is contained in a 7-chapter SCR book. So these are the topics that we cover. We start with the foundational science behind climate change so that you can have a working knowledge of the science in this space. We introduce the concept of sustainability and what it means to different entities. We address climate change risk in terms of physical and transitional risk. We also cover sustainability and climate policy, culture, and governance as they've evolved over time. We do an introduction to green and sustainable finance so you can better understand the key markets and instrument considerations. And then we finally end with our climate risk measurement and management so you can understand how to get your arms around these concepts and monitor them at your own entity. And then we also discuss climate modeling and scenario analysis best practices. After you complete the program, this doesn't end your journey. If you wish, you can maintain current through our CPD program. You can also refer to our Shifting Landscapes website, which includes many useful white papers, podcasts, webinars, and just general knowledge points for you to continue your education in the area. And then we invite you to join a local GARP chapter. We're all over the world. You can connect with your peers in the risk management space. And while we do encourage you to join the SCR LinkedIn group, this is a closed group on LinkedIn. When you're preparing for the exam, we encourage you to stay a member so that you can mentor others, and then again you can network with people in your group. This is an overview of our CPD program. So we actually collate sources from not just GARP but other risk management fundamentals for you to continue your knowledge. These are some of the resources that are out there on our sustainability and climate site. So again, free to anyone that's a part of the program. We have ongoing podcasts, we have ongoing webcasts, and then again, we have surveys of risk managers, and you can also access the TCFD Knowledge Hub here. When I think about our chapters, we truly are a global organization. So this gives you an overview of where our chapters are located, and we're continuing to evolve and open new chapters as the demand necessitates itself to. We have over 20 chapters around the world. We're on every continent in Antarctica. And then we historically have over 70,000 FRMs, our flagship certification, that are members of chapters. But as this SCR population continues to grow, we're also seeing SCR holders at our chapter meetings. For now, you can also access many chapter offerings virtually. And then finally, this is just a highlight of our LinkedIn group for future reference if anyone is interested to join. Well, without further ado, I want to get to our panel. This is why we are here today. So again, thank you to our panelists for joining. We have Guillaume Nerzik, he's Senior Manager at Baringa Partners. And we have Ryan Vaughn, Technical Product Manager for Jupiter Intelligence. Thank you again for joining us today.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm very glad to be here.
Let me start off with you, Guillaume. Could you introduce yourself and just describe your current role?
Oh, okay. So my name is Guillaume Nerzik. I'm originally French, but I live in London. My background is dual. I have an IT background, but also a lot of experience working for financial institutions, mostly in stress testing. And I did actually spend quite a lot of the most of my career at a large bank, HSBC, doing their group-wide stress testing. I got involved or interested in climate as I got aware that the Bank of England was going to do a climate-related stress test, and that got me very interested into the subject. And I started then wanted to learn more about it. I became then involved with the SCR exam because I wanted to sit it, and then I then moved on to Baringa Partner, who are one of the leading consultancies in London on climate risk and sustainable finance. And I've been working with them for about a year and a bit now, and on various climate-related projects that we can talk about later on during the podcast.
It's quite the journey. Thank you. Thank you for giving us your time today. Ryan, would you mind introducing yourself? Just telling us a little bit about what you're working on currently?
Sorry, I was looking at wasn't the question I thought you were going to ask me. But hello, I'm Ryan, and my background, I'm an economist. I spent a long time, you see on the slide, working for Bank of America in the US, building standard models, and I got fairly concerned about climate change a few years ago. And via my position at B of A, I was introduced to the SCR certification, and that's how I knew about it. And that's why I pivoted my career. I now work at a company that specializes in physical climate risk. So literally every single part of my day from the beginning to the end relates to physical climate risk, looking at the models that predict what's going to happen in the path of the climate into the future, and trying to incorporate that into financial metrics that can then be useful for making good decisions based around that data.
Well, yeah, you told us a little bit about why, how you found out about the program for sure, but why did you pursue the certificate? Why did you find it would be meaningful for that next chapter?
Well, I was very familiar with the FRM and the prestige of that certificate. So GARP already had, my respect in that and from that front. So when I learned about the SCR, and I knew it's like I've been at Jupiter for a year and a bit now, very similar time trajectory to Guillaume, and I needed to very quickly kickstart my knowledge of climate science and climate finance, and forcing myself to study for an exam by a well-respected organization seemed like a good move. And it was great. Here I am participating further.
I know. Thank you so much. I'd be interested too, Guillaume. How did you find out about the SCR certificate? Why did you feel like it was worth your time? Because I said about 130 hours. That's a lot of time. How did you find out about it, and what made you pursue the certificate?
Well, at the time when I was researching the subject area, which was probably around 2018, 2019, where I started really doing my own self-study around that. In the landscape, there was quite a lot of content to read, but no recognized certificate, definitely not by an organization like GARP. So when GARP decided to release that exam, it was in my radar quite quickly, and that's the reason why I was interested in the certificate. But also coming from a risk background, and also to do with stress testing, where we were making decisions based on data and on data models, the approach and the curriculum that GARP was offering around that space really talked to me directly. I did really want to get down to the point where you would actually do scenario-based modeling and do it in the climate space, where I really saw that was where that kind of risk management approach would be the most relevant. And so I didn't have to shop around very much to decide that was going to be the right exam for me. It actually fit my background quite well.
Well, it's interesting that you say that. I also wanted to understand, so you've transitioned roles since you first came to the SCR program. So how relevant is the SCR curriculum to your new role? I say new, it's been over a year, but how relevant is it, do you find?
Well, the short question is very, but maybe I'll expand a little bit on that. Obviously, from my background, it answers the specific question I was trying to ask, which was, how would you do a scenario-based risk management? How do you do stress testing? How do you take decisions on that? And how do you move forward on that basis? So it ticked those boxes, but that doesn't really answer fully what I got from the exam. Specifically, because I moved into consultancy, you really do need to understand a wide breadth of subjects in the area. So regulation, around financing, around other things that we can talk about, but also quite deep, and also understand where we're coming from around the climate science and around some of the regulations that came that govern where we are today. So I guess if I'd done the study just by myself, I would have just focused on that one bit that I was interested in, which was that scenario-based risk management approach. But that wouldn't have made me a well-rounded consultant. It would have just made me an expert. And what the exam was able to do, and where I get a lot of additional professional benefit, is to be that well-rounded individual with quite a lot of depth of knowledge, which is invaluable for the kind of work that I do.
Interesting. So it sounds like, too, it's allowed you to go deeper in the areas that are specific to what you're working on, is what I'm hearing.
It has, but also allowed me to be well-rounded. Sometimes when if you're trying to help organizations, they may come to you with very left field questions around, what about such and such regulation, or what do you think about transition financing, or what, like what are the basics of SBTI or other things like that. So if I'd just done my own self-study, I would have just focused on the area that I was very, very interested in, and I wouldn't be able to field these specific questions.
And
so
now
that
you're
was
more
the benefit
well-rounded.
for me. They're much more well-rounded, but also being able to speak from a position of knowledge and understanding, rather than just repeating acronyms without really understanding what they mean.
There are a lot of acronyms. Brian, what do you think? How relevant is the program to your current role? Because you also have switched roles in the past few years.
Yeah, well, I mean, very relevant. It's associated with a transition in my career, which was my goal. So thank you for helping with that. My role is specific to physical climate hazard. That's what my company sells. And I try to take the path of information, what's going to happen to floods, heat, winds, droughts into the future, and how's that going to impact the financial outcome for, say, mortgages and companies, et cetera. And so I'm using what I know from the exam about how climate science works constantly, and being able to connect the breadth, as Guillaume was saying, on the depth and breadth of the green finance institutions that are out there. That is a lot to pick up. And I think on a self-directed study, I probably would not have hit as much of it as I did through the exam. And I found the exam, honestly, I really like being held to deadlines. I'm much better when I feel like there's an expectation of something, if I'm completely self-directed, I might not work as hard. So I really did put in well over 100 hours of reading to prepare for this exam, and I would not have studied that hard without it. So just being an exam itself I found very helpful. And it helped to get me up to that level of confidence. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Guillaume.
I have a question for you, Ryan, because I guess my journey was, I haven't moved so far. So I worked in stress testing for a financial institution, and I moved into a consultancy where we help financial institutions sort of measure climate risk and do net zero targeting and those types of things. So I guess I haven't moved very far from the tree from which I fell. But yourself, you've actually gone a little bit further, because physical risk modeling is a lot further from the economics background you had. So did you find that there was quite a lot of leap from what you had done before? And also because I guess the GARP exam touches on physical risk, specifically the science, but doesn't really go into that in so much detail, I found. So how much was that helpful? Because I do think that you've moved much further away from your initial career than I did.
Right. Yeah, I definitely did pivot pretty far. Part of what I was trying to say earlier was that the physical risk component of the GARP study program gives you the foundation to know what questions to ask next, and what are the right questions to ask to gain a deeper understanding of the physical modeling side of things. It is a very deep and complex arena with multiple fields all converging in one place. So even PhDs in climate science, they may not really understand all aspects of it, because some of them focus on hydrology, some of them focus on weather patterns, some of them are very narrowly focused on how water moves around coastlines. And all of that comes together in what we call climate modeling. So just knowing how much there is, right, and how much you don't know is something that you learn when you start to study for this exam. And that gives you the foundation to pick the right questions and what do I study next and how do I deepen my understanding. Because you're right, you're not going to get a master's degree in climate science by studying for the exam, but it does clear out the chaff of the multitudes of information that are out there and help you understand or more efficiently move forward with what you need to know.
I guess so. And even though we have had different journeys, and as I said, probably I have not gone as far as into it as you had, but yes, I would say that I've had the same kind of experience where the exam and studying for the exam really gives you quite a large breadth, but also it shows you what an evolving discipline it is, and to carry on asking questions. And from my perspective, helping our clients in the consultancy where I have, realizing that nobody really has the right answer right now. So to carry on answering, being inquisitive and challenging everything and challenging what people are saying, because everybody's still discovering what the solution is, but need to make a move straight away. So we have to learn as we move along.
Absolutely, yeah.
One thing I do hear from people that have completed the certificate is that it's allowed them to better understand these emerging trends in these reports. Like when the latest, when the AR5, AR6 comes out, you can better understand it. When, we have these world recognized reports that come out, they can, better understand and appreciate how this might impact where they work and their career too, if you want to change strategically. Have you all found the same, or do you feel like there's more to seek out there on your own?
So actually, I had a little bit of a different experience when I first started studying for the exam, and it was at the outset of it. Specifically, when you look at there's a very there's very thorough introduction around regulations, around guidance and existing initiatives, so the network for greening the financial system, or the principles of responsible investment, et cetera, et cetera. And what I had, I came to the realization that a lot of very, very smart people, not just in the climate space, not in the climate research space, but actually in regulation and finance, had done a lot of fundamental work already, had set the foundations of what this kind of professionalism was. And so you were actually walking not into something that was not well understood, but into a foundation, something where the foundations had already been set, and quite robust foundations at that. And that gave a lot of confidence around, all right, well, yeah, I can evolve in that space and I can help, because we're really not starting from first principles at the moment. There is quite a lot of existing regulations and that has set the foundations. And then to your point, yes, and that made it easier to also understand what these different regulations were, what these different guidance and building stones were, in order to focus your understanding and where you would investigate next. But it was actually how they all fit together, and the fact that the edifice was there, that was a real eye-opener for me when I started studying for the exam.
Do you have any additional thoughts on that one, Ryan?
No, sorry. I got distracted by one of the questions that I saw from one of the panelists. And I want to comment that we've been very focused on the physical risk discussion and the content on the exam, but at least I have, and I would say more than half of it, probably 60–70% of it is really more on the financial regulation side of things and the different classifications of green bonds and just the finance side of the climate space. And it is very valuable. I was probably more valuable to someone who with a sole background in climate science than it was to me, but I still found the whole entirety of it valuable.
Yeah, I do see a question that came in that if someone has a background in climate science and they want to move into the climate risk management.
I think honestly, probably even more valuable in that case. If you don't have a background in finance, that's I think the major focus of the study materials is the climate science is like the first 25%, and then the rest of it is green finance. And so you probably have more to learn than I did.
Yeah, so we do hit on the risk management fundamentals. Just thinking about, wherever you work or whatever sector you're in, how you would approach these risks from that point of view, and then apply that knowledge. That's really the objective here. We want people to take this knowledge and be able to go back to their company and start making different decisions, or at the very least start asking different questions, so that you're looking at your existing risk management framework through that climate lens. And how does my regulatory exposure change? How does my business continuity plan change given climate risk. Well, thinking about advice you could offer to those who are considering the SCR program. Ryan, do you have any advice you'd offer for someone that's, let me look at this curriculum. Is it going to be meaningful for me? What would you tell that person?
It's very approachable. It's not something I think to be intimidated by. So if you're interested in it, I would not delay doing it because you feel you don't have the capacity or you're not ready. Right? I don't think any academic background in either finance or climate science is necessary to be successful with the program. So yeah, just don't be intimidated about starting would be my advice. And I blocked out an hour every morning to read, and that was the bulk of the studying that I did for 3 or 4 months.
Yeah,
Guillaume, what advice do you have to offer?
So, yes, it is. I would agree with what Ryan has said. And also, and this is, so I've been helping, sort of connecting with other SCR graduates, but also helping some other colleagues in my company who are studying for the exam. Now, from the first group, I think a lot of the, maybe Ryan would have the same experience, an overwhelming feeling that people really engage with the content very, very well. It's really relevant content. It's and it's something which is crucial for our time. So it's not it's not obtuse, and it's not difficult to get really interested in it and to dig in it quite further. So people really like to engage with the study material itself. To go back to the question that was asked and what we were discussing around, which was how relevant it is for me given my background is in this, or my background is in this kind of research and things like that. And this is the advice that I was giving to my colleagues who were sitting the exam this time around. A lot of a very successful way of doing it is to always consider the content that you're looking at in the context of your existing practice. So I work with a lot of people who are original risk professional and finance risk professionals. And so rather than just consuming the content or try to memorize it or just reading it without being critical, to be critical, to put it in the context of the way you currently work in order to understand how it would change the way you look at specific problems, and then to be critical about the content in that from that point of view. And that allows you both to learn it in a way that's going to retain in your brain much longer than trying to memorize it, but also to engage with the study material in a much more constructive way. And I find that is a very successful approach, and one that could be adopted by regardless of what backgrounds you have. You could always put it in context of what you're currently doing.
Yeah, I am seeing a few questions come through. People are working in different sectors and have different experiences and want to better understand how the curriculum might address these differences. So we do have a thoughtful approach to embedding case studies throughout the program, so that as you review these concepts and these theories and these standards, you can actually understand them from different sectoral points of view. So for instance, from a manufacturing point of view, from a real estate management point of view. So throughout the curriculum, you're not just memorizing and regurgitating the material. You're understanding that application-based approach to what is this going to mean for me if I'm working in insurance or reinsurance? How is that going to make sense for me? And then we've also received questions around keeping the content fresh. And clearly this is a rapidly evolving area. So we do have an annual update for our curriculum where we review the book that we put together, which is provided to anyone that registers for the program, just to ensure that it's current. If there's any big macro changes, we can update the curriculum. We use subject matter experts for that, as well as people that have gone through the program. And then in addition to that, we also have suggested online readings. And this allows us to go to sources of information that are going to be evolving in real time. And as those updates are made, you'll have access to that. Again, available to anyone who's registered for the program. But beyond that, after you've taken the program and you've earned their certificate, you sat for the exam successfully, we do have our continuing professional development program, which it's not required, it's voluntary, but it's another way you can continue just your knowledge as it evolves, as the space continues to evolve. I would point you to, and I mentioned it briefly, our risk intelligence website. So that's where you can find, interviews with thought leaders. We have podcasts, webcasts, interactive ways to increase your knowledge. And then if you just want to catch up on articles and readings and publications that have come out, you'll have access to all of those tools as well. Because the program is a few years old, but people that took the program back in 2020 have seen this landscape change. So we want to enable people to have that ongoing journey with increasing their knowledge as the space continues to evolve. So I hope I've answered a few of those questions. Do either of you, maybe Guillaume, do you have any advice for continuing your educational journey post-certificate?
It's always an ongoing journey. So I think that's what the certificate has allowed me to do, is to maybe reiterating, like being very knowledgeable about the areas that I wanted to be knowledgeable about, which was so scenario-based risk modeling, but also around like regulations and things, and physical risk modeling, those types of things. I guess. It allowed me to know how to do my own research where I need to go and focus next. And because of the nature of the work that I do at the moment, there's quite a lot of work in additional areas. So to give you a couple of examples, for one of the projects I was doing, we were really looking at how we would do sovereign risk modeling, specifically around the physical and transition risk at country level. That's a really interesting area. And again, being able to understand the good sources and get to the nub of it quite quickly, but also again putting it in the context of what we're looking at, it's quite important. And also you then understand also where there's a gap in potentially in what's being covered, but also an ongoing discussion in the marketplace. At the moment, we're looking quite a lot at the concept of not green or sustainable finance, but more to do with transition finance, and finding the good definitions to do with that. That's something that isn't well understood enough to be part of the certificate. But again, allowing the certificate to create that as the basis allows you to understand where is the gap, understand where the debate is, and I can also kind of figure out where it's going to go next. So I haven't really answered your question there, Beth, but what I think I've tried to get to is it helps you understand where you're trying to approach a new subject that isn't really covered in the certificate, because the understanding isn't bedded down enough to be able to be part of a formal exam. Really gives you like the right basis to be able to push that further and help your organization's understanding of something that isn't really well understood right now.
Well, I do see another question on the materials themselves and how often we update them. We did produce our own authored book for this year, and we made a lot of the readings that were printed in the book, if you took it a couple of years ago, online. So in an effort to streamline the curriculum, a lot of the readings that were collated in the book are now provided as some required links. So under our study tools, we actually have a library of required readings that are made available to all candidates. And then our book focuses more on streamlining the exam preparation, really understanding these concepts. So each book begins with some key concepts that you can kind of test yourself throughout the chapter. And it ends with a series of end of chapter questions to kind of test yourself throughout. So that was, just a way to improve the candidate preparation experience moving forward. I did see someone say they recommend people just stick with the ebook and not get the print, but you can opt for a print version if you like. The ebook is given to anyone that registers for the exam, but if you do want to have a printed book, we do have those available as well.
There's been an evolution, and also in the way that the GARP is collecting the material. So when Ryan and I sat the exam, which would have been at the tail end of 2020, it wasn't. The narrative was not so well written by GARP. It was basically a bunch of reports and papers that we had to go through, and it was end up quite a lot of content that we had to master, or actually cover, I guess, not master.
It was like a course reader from a college course, is what it felt like.
Yeah.
I remember getting a meter
Exactly.
in college course.
But what I found now with the updated version and the updated book that's being produced by GARP is that the content is just as rich. It covers the same kind of thing, and because I've gone through it again with the people I've helped. But it's succinct enough, to the targeted enough, so that it is easier for the whole chapter to be covered by a group and then discussed in much more detail in order to make sure that all the nuances are well captured, where because the previous material was much thicker, it would have been much more difficult to do that in kind of a group study kind of way. So I found that more shorter, more curated way of giving the narrative, the educational narrative, was really successful. And it really helped in small groups to go through it and really critique it and have a live debate about the content.
That's great to hear. I mean, well, firstly, that you're mentoring others that are going through the program, but we really wanted to streamline the material, eliminate some redundancies throughout, and then just include some case studies again, so that we had collated the latest and greatest and leading subject matter experts in this space into one book. But the materials that we have now were developed specifically for GARP and cover the exact key concepts, but it's much more streamlined. I've heard it's much easier to study, follow a study plan on, and then all of the readings that the advisory committee felt were still very relevant, that weren't GARP owned, they're available online. I actually had a colleague that printed out all the online readings, and it's quite lengthy. So we didn't eliminate anything. We just kind of repackaged and helped you better prepare. We also wanted to add those end of chapter questions in addition to the case studies, just to help you understand, okay, what are some of these key concepts and how are they going to play out for me personally. So Ryan, we didn't get to you. I want to understand, how do you stay current with some of these issues continue to evolve, obviously. So beyond the certificate, how have you remained current with some of the latest developments out there?
Yeah, I saw a bunch of questions about that come in, and also I saw one: realistically, how many hours of studying do you really need to do? Probably fewer than I did, to be totally honest, to just get the bare minimum and pass the exam. But I think myself and probably most of the people interested in doing this are pivoting to a climate change or climate finance related career because they're passionate and mission driven. I personally am very mission driven in doing this work, and I just keep reading, right? There's so much. And I think Guillaume said at one point that the foundations are there, and that's true, but it's also true that it seems like every other week a new 300-page document comes out from some regulatory body that you need to digest, and there's so much. So I read constantly, but I'm happy about it, right? Like, I've moved into a space where the work I'm doing, I feel like it's important, and I'm very interested in the content and everything that I'm gaining. So the short answer is I like the studying, so I just keep doing it, right? And the exam was there to help me get started. It just was there to say, here, read this 800-page book, which now I think is much shorter. But how do I pick from all the vast array of possible texts to start studying about climate change and climate finance? Well, I picked one thing, it got me going, and I just haven't slowed down. But yeah, there's a lot. So anyone who feels like there's an overwhelming amount of information out there right now, you're not alone.
Yeah, and I think it's a thing, and it probably doesn't matter which area you're in, but this is something which is still evolving. So there's still a lot of publications. When you're doing research on it, you're always referring back to papers which are dated, 2021, 2020 and stuff. Everything is very recent. So it's obviously you have to be a little bit passionate about it and know that it is an important bit of work. But it is a lot. So in my organization, we try to sort of kind of curate a little bit or organize a little bit the different areas of knowledge and how it's evolving. And so that we can sort of, at least it's not an exercise for every single person to refresh that all the time, but actually to have different areas of expertise and references, so that when we do have knowledge management that occurs within our company, it's not just a massive dump of information that goes there, but it is curated, well explained, and accessible. But I guess it's to do with the kind of work that and the kind of engagement that we have, because we have to be on the forefront of where it all occurs. But I think that's what Ryan and I are getting at, is that this is still evolving. So we can't just do this exam and go, right, cool, I know everything that there is. There isn't, because the knowledge is still evolving and the way that we're addressing the problem is still evolving.
I do want to point out too, our committee, which continues to evolve and grow. And when I'm looking at the committee, I think at least half a dozen of them have changed roles in this past year. And just, to reiterate that this is a rapidly evolving space and people are getting pulled in different directions, but we do have a very diverse group of subject matter experts that help us evaluate the curriculum on a regular basis. So are there any trends that maybe aren't completely well understood that we should just think about for future consideration? Or is this something that we really need to develop some key learnings around for people to understand in their current work? So again, just to reiterate that we have a very broad committee of subject matter experts. And I should also say that, including the two on the call, we do utilize our SCR community. So we have this SCR community as we increase in size, and we go back to people that have passed the program and ask for advice. Can you review exam questions for us? Do our learning objectives make sense? Is there anything that we're missing? Are we being redundant in some areas, too deep or too shallow in others? So if you have gone through the program and you do earn your certificate, we do have opportunities for you to not only network with others, but give back to the program. So if you're interested to review chapters of the book as they're updated, if you're interested to review questions or develop questions, we utilize subject matter experts in this community because they're actually in the trenches dealing with these issues on a regular basis. So it not only allows us to have the networking for people that have gone through the program, but also it makes sure that our curriculum is fresh and it reflects what people are actually seeing that are dealing with this on a regular basis. It's not just the theory, but it's the application of these concepts that we want to reiterate. Well, we have spent a lot of time talking specifically about the program, but I don't want to get away from kind of the broader, I'm seeing some questions come to this as well. When I think about trends that should be on the mind of professionals working in the sustainability and climate risk management space, what are you seeing? What do you think that we need to keep an eye on? Are the things that, as risk managers, we always say we want to prepare for those emerging trends that we don't see. What are the trends that you have top of mind? Guillaume, I'll start with you.
Okay, well, I want to, maybe I can weave that into another question that I saw on that about if there's any resistance in the banking community around some of the climate risk and how we evolve. So if I could summarize maybe the trends that we're seeing, we're really seeing that for some of our clients, really see an opportunity around like addressing the climate challenge head on and really helping their customers doing that. And that kind of drive, you can see it from the top of the house all the way down to the people like actually doing the work in the banks. And so there is quite a lot of like positive momentum around wanting to do well and do good in this area. But that doesn't really tell us a trend. That just tells us an overall dynamic that I'm seeing within some of the client groups that we've got. And it's culturally different in different banks, but definitely you do see that quite a lot. I think the trends that we're going to see, maybe looking a little bit further, is the enormity of the task that's in front of us. We're not yet tackling the problem. So like the amount of investment that's required for the real economy to transition to a net zero economy is stupendous. It's like $350 trillion worth of investment is needed. And that's a lot. If you look at what green bonds, the green bond market is at the moment, it's not there. So it's like we're talking about fundamental shift in the way that we're going to do that and the way that we're looking at the kind of financing that the real economy needs in order to transition. And so probably one of the trends that we're going to see is a complete shift gear change and a shift in perspective in order to meet that challenge. Because the other thing that we're going to see is, again, the enormity of the risk that is in front of us. So just today, I think it was the IPCC said there's a 50-50 chance that we're going to hit over 1.5 degrees in the next 10 years just as a precursor of what could happen next. And that, the enormity of the risk and the enormity of the challenge, but also the enormity of the opportunity in terms of the amount of funding that's needed, I think that the penny maybe has just started to drop. And I think as it's completely dropping, that's where we're going to see people taking an immense leap forward in making sure that we're dealing with this risk correctly, but taking the opportunities, like this kind of financing that's required in order to fund the real economy to transition is a massive, massive opportunity. And we need to embrace it. We need to do it correctly. Otherwise, the risks are huge. So the trend that I'm trying to summarize is the enormity of the work that's left to do, and understanding the enormity of the work.
Ryan, do you have some thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's a big job, and I'm glad there's 170 people here listening to us right now, because it needs more. It needs that and more to get done. But as a trend that I see, it's a level of sophistication in the general population and the audience for this type of work. And even 2 years ago at Bank of America, I was a concerned citizen who had gone to Al Gore's Climate Reality Project training and maybe read a few popular science books. And I was by far the most sophisticated person in my area. I was in the risk division at BMA, and I was the climate person there. I was the one that people asked questions, and I was just some guy who was concerned. And now 2 years later, I talk to people and I'm getting very specific questions about assumptions made with respect to GCMs that you pick to model very specific perils. And these are coming from non-climate scientists. So the level of sophistication in the world with respect to climate change, what it is, how you measure it, and what the right things to do are is increasing and increasing rapidly. So the studying for something like this and just getting started is more necessary than ever moving into the climate space, because the days when it was just a bunch of people that didn't know what they were doing are over. Now it's a bunch of people that know very well what they're doing and they don't know what to do yet, which is a different problem to solve. But it's all getting very sophisticated. That's the trend that I see.
Well, and I did see a question here I thought that would be interesting to address that kind of dovetails with that last point, Ryan. The experts that we're getting insights from for the program, they're not just from the private sector, they're public sector, they're academia, they're regulators. So, I mean, it is a big problem to solve, like Guillaume said, and we need to have different points of view. When you're thinking about the investment side of things, we want to have both. Who are you investing and who is doing the investing? You want to have that holistic conversation. So it's not just private sector companies that are represented from a subject matter expertise. It is more well-rounded than that. Well, I just wanted to leave off. Are there any final thoughts y'all have on the program that you'd like to offer? Just in summary, I'd start with you, Ryan.
Just that GARP as an organization has been a joy to work with. You all are all very pleasant, and the level of responsiveness and professionalism, I'm just happy to be involved. Proud to be associated. That's the only thing I would add over what I've said so far.
Thank you. Guillaume, do you have any final thoughts?
I'd completely echo with what Ryan has just said about GARP. But the other thing also that I would say, and echoing what you were talking about the engagement to the wider community, like private, like regulatory, government, and stuff like that. I think what one of the things that has been really true as I've moved from my traditional risk stress testing activities into this climate risk and scenario modeling and discipline is that's exposed me to, as well as a professional, to people with lots of different backgrounds, not just finance anymore. Because you do need that sector expertise, you do need that political expertise, you need all of those things in order to make a real change to the economy. And so that's really maybe got me out of my corner where I was like very effective in what I did, but probably just in a financial stress testing way, not engaging with the rest of the real economy. And as you're moving into this climate problem or opportunity, you do end up having to consider the real economy and having to seek that expertise, and be it from the private sector or sort of climate experts and physical risk experts like Ryan. You really just need to be able to touch all of it. And I think, as a conclusion, quite apart from what I get personally from having done the exam and the lifelong learning that has kicked off, it's really like branched out and allowed me to engage with lots of other professionals, and that's been immensely rewarding.
Thank you both of you. Again, I appreciate your time. Y'all are in very different time zones, so I appreciate your time centrally contributing today. One thing I did want to leave off with for people that are interested to learn more about GARP, we do have some upcoming events that are virtual, that we have some chapter meetings in different places around the world. We do have a live webcast coming up as well. We're also convening as a community at our risk convention. So we've had 2 instances, and one in Europe, one in Asia. We're going to convene in a hybrid format in New York next month. And I would also encourage you to visit Risk Intelligence. If you just want to understand some of the key trends that are coming out there, you can actually collate and search by industry, if you like, keywords, if you will. If you wanted to look at energy, for instance, you can see some of the things that are collated from a risk management perspective on energy. And then there's also some helpful links. And we will make this available to anyone joining today. So in case you didn't do a screen grab or jot down some of these links, we'll have this available to each of you. And I, again, appreciate all your time from a listening perspective, and thank you for joining us today.
And I would also, sorry, Anna Jo, right at the end, I also highly recommend Jo Paisley's podcast. She is really good. You can listen to all of it, and she gets the best speakers on it. Like Jo Paisley's podcast is an amazing resource. So that definitely use all of that. She's great.
She does talk to a wide variety of people about a wide variety of topics. Yes. If you're into podcast, I highly recommend as well. All right. Thank you so much for joining us.